Hello, my name is Sam and welcome to another video talking about Tabforms 5 for iOS and Mac. Today we're going to continue on our theme of meal planning. We're up to episode 5. If you haven't seen the previous videos, check them out. They're in a convenient little playlist that you can use to catch up with where we're at. Now, one of the suggestions on the earlier videos from Brendan was in fact to add a image field so that we can have a look at our recipe. And as you can see, I haven't really added much to our recipe list, but we are going to add at least the placeholder for this instant pot lamb stew today. So we're going to add a new record for it, and we're going to grab that and paste that over. And now we're going to add a new photo field for this delicious looking stew. There we go. So we've got our photo field added, so that's pretty cool. Now I'm not going to actually enter this in right now. So what we're going to do is add in a website field so that I can actually just come back to this later. I'll call that source and index it. Now, one other thing we're going to do before we leave this is we're going to move this photo field and we're going to make it the first one in the list. And you'll see on the left here that what that's done is it's put the photo inside the list view as the first little piece of the thing, and we can see the image for this particular record because we have one. We could go back and update our Hong Kong soup, add in the source for it, and then add in some images, but that's a thing for another time. Now, the other thing that has happened with this particular form is I've done soups, and what I've started doing is sort of these beef soups on the weekend, and then cooking it so that I use that for lunch in the following week. And we can see it here: soup. So that's pretty cool. But this week, no entry, right? There's no entry to have for lunch. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with this record, and what we're going to do is create a copy of it. Now, to do that, we're going to use the prompter. So to get started here, what we're going to do is go over to scripts, and we're going to create a new form script. And we're going to, we'll just call it copy meal. I don't really have a good name for this, mostly because I'm really just not that creative. We're going to delete the default boilerplate that Tabforms gives us, because what we're going to do is actually start off with a snippet, and we're looking for this prompt for input snippet. Now, what the prompt for input snippet does is, we'll just hit run on that, prompt for some input. So message prompt, we've got a label, we've got some options, and when we hit continue, we can see them in the interface here at the bottom. Now, I'm going to do a minor change to this, which is instead of calling this value 1 and value 2, we're going to call it value 1 is going to be number of days. We'll just call it days. And value 2 is going to be meal type. And what we're going to do is change value 1 here to be days, and then value 2 here to be meal type. And we're going to change our label to be days to copy, which is going to be our little text option. I'm going to change the meal type to be our pop-up here, and we're going to have breakfast, lunch, and dinner as our 3 options. And we're going to have that be copy meal. We do also need to change the entry here to be days, and then we'll change this to be meal type. So let's hit run on that. Make sure that we still work. So days to copy, we'll make that 3. We're going to do lunch. 3, lunch. Sweet. Now, if we hit cancel on this, because there's a cancel option, we get undefined and undefined. And actually, if you look at the manual, we can see that there's actually an extra little continued option, which is continued equals true, or the cancel button was pressed. So let's wire that in while we're looking at it, and we'll do if continued doesn't equal true. So if we didn't continue it, let's just escape. We don't want to do anything. Tapforms gives us the opportunity to do something interesting if somebody hits cancel, but in this case, we just want to exit out, return control. We're done. Okay. So the next thing we need to do is validate days, because I can go in now and set days to copy to be ASDF, and that gives me no control. Now I could also set this to be a pop-up, but I think it's nicer to have it as a bit of text, because what we're going to do is some number validation. Now we can see there are a bunch of different types here for the prompter. So we've got a password type, we've got our pop-up type, there's a pick list type, which drives off, basically is the same pop-up type, except for the values are taken from the Tapforms pick list. But there's no sort of make sure this is a number type. So what we really want to do is create daynum is going to be a number of days. Now inside of JavaScript is this number object, and what it's going to do is try to turn whatever days is into a number. Now this isn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but what it allows us to do is ask the question, is if is not a number days num, then we can do an alert, and let's go have a look at the manual and an alert. What is an alert? Alert with message. Okay, let's grab that. That's sort of what we want to do. Displays an alert with a specified title and message. And that's perhaps one too many exclamation marks, but we'll say entered days is not a number, and we'll add in, we'll use a plus sign, which with the strings means to concatenate or join together, and we're going to just use days num as that entry. We're also going to hit return here again as well. What we might also do here is a console.log copy meal was cancelled. So we'll hit save to this, and we'll run it, and we'll make sure that it still works. Right now, we could probably keep writing code, but it's useful to just incrementally add stuff, make sure it still works. Okay, so 5 and lunch, we didn't get any error. That's expected. Now, if we do ASDF and lunch, we should get an error saying enter days is not a number, and it says not a number. That's not particularly helpful. What we probably actually want here is just to make that days. So let's fix that. And oops, we're going to test the failure case. And we can say error, enter days is not a number, ASDF. Very cool. Now, at this point, we've got our meal type, we've got our number of days. We probably want to double check actually if meal type and meal type dot length is greater than 1. If not meal type, actually, so if meal type isn't defined and the length is less than 1, equals to 0, what we want to do is Actually, this is a good question. What do we want to do? So I was thinking maybe we want to put an alert up, but maybe if you don't specify the meal type, we just get the meal type out of the record, which means we're going to have to start grabbing some IDs. So let's grab these 4 fields. So we're going to our name, our type, our date, and our source, our secret source. And so if meal type is not set, meal type is going to be equal to record.get field value meal type ID. Okay, that makes sense. So we've validated, we've got a number, we're going to set the meal type, and now the next piece is we need to create a for loop for let I equals 1. And so we're going to start this at 1. So this is going to be day 1. I is less than equal to the days num. So the number of days as the actual number. So we want to make sure that we go and check that properly. And I++ means increment this number. So let's just have a look at what this looks like. And we're going to do console.log I. Now what we should expect is that I is going to increment. And we can test that. So days to copy, and we can just leave that as is. Undefined, cannot find meal type, because meal type has a lowercase t. Okay, let's hit run on that. And number of days to copy 5. Leave that as unspecified, and we can see, as we expected, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 outputted. Okay, so our next step is we need to have a meal. We need to update the meal date, because what we're going to do is increment that by the number that we've got here. And we are assuming that we're going to do that based on the current date. So what we need to do is, to get started, we'll get the current date. So let's do that and log that out, make sure that does what we expect. And the date of this record is April 11th. That's kind of what we expect at midnight GMT -7. Now the next piece we want to do is we need to increase this by a day, right? And we need to do it by a day of per each entry in the loop. So we need to make it ideally Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So to do that, what we're going to do is get the time, the value of the time, and this is going to give us the time of the record in milliseconds from the JavaScript epoch, which is January 1st, 1970. Now, the reason we want this in milliseconds is so that we can add a date in a relatively safe manner. And so what we need to do is multiply by the date offset we're on. So this will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Like that's what we've logged right here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then we need to add the length of a day in milliseconds, which is going to be 24, oops, if I can type, 24 hours multiplied by 60 minutes, multiplied by 60 seconds, multiplied by 1,000 to take those seconds to milliseconds. Now the reason we do that is that gives us exactly 24 hours. Now the problem with this is that because we're adding 24 hours as 24 hours, it doesn't account for daylight savings. And to be honest, JavaScript is pretty poor when it comes to dealing with time and daylight savings. And this is sort of the compromise we have to make. Most of the time this is going to be correct. Every so often when we do this over a daylight savings switch, we may find that this ends up being a day earlier or a day later. So it'll be a little off because, you know, with daylight savings, some days are 23 hours and other days are 25 hours. And obviously every other day of the year is still 24 hours long, give or take a second, for leap seconds. So this is not 100% correct, but this is, I say, good enough for what we need to do. But keep in mind that around daylight savings, this sort of format won't work 100%. So let's hit run on that, because each time we make a change, we want to test. And we can see that the time here is incrementing, right? We've got different values for each of the days, but we're still in milliseconds, and we don't really want to do milliseconds. So what we're going to do is create a new date. And that new date is going to take our time in milliseconds and then turn it into time in something we recognize. And we can see Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. We're going to put that into a variable and we'll call it meal date to be consistent with meal type. And now our next step is we need to create our record data. I'm going to call that record data. Lowercase d. I'm all over the place tonight. We'll do an uppercase for this. And what we're actually doing here is we're creating an object. And the reason we're creating this object is that we're going to use that to set a bunch of values. And the reason I want to create an object now is so that we can construct the structure of this object and then test it to see that it outputs the data that we expect of it. Before we wire it into actually creating a record, because when we create a record, when we save it, that gets persisted to the database, and if we find out that we did something wrong, then we have to go back and we have to delete things, and it's work. Nobody wants to do work. Tapforms is about making life easier. So name, type, data, date, and source ID. So what we're going to do is map in these values. So meal name first, and we're going to copy that from the underlying record. So it's going to be the same as that. We're going to do meal date ID, and we're going to copy that from the underlying. Actually, no, we're not. We're going to use our meal date that we just calculated. We're going to have the meal type ID, and that's also going to be the meal type field that we just set. And last but not least, we're going to have the source ID, and that's actually going to come from the record. Oops, source ID. Okay, so now we've set all of this up. Delete that. We're going to log out our record data, and we're going to use json.stringify. This is my absolute favorite thing for debugging, because it turns the data you get, the object you have, into a JSON string, which prints out all of the field values and names and everything. So it makes it really easy to understand what's in there. But we have a syntax error, which is unexpected token line 31. So what this probably means is that we didn't count the number of brackets properly. So we opened a bracket, closed a bracket, open, closed. We have one extra bracket. That's okay. Save that, run that, try this again. Sweet. And I'm actually going to set that to be lunch, because I really want this record to be lunch. Meal type dot length is not a function. That's because it's a property. So that's good. We'll fix that. 5 lunch go. Sweet. Okay, so this has sort of done what we expected it to do. The name is beef soup, and that's sort of what we wanted it to be, right? Because that's what it is. The date is set to be 13th, 14th, 15th, 16th. So that's what we're after. And our meal type we set to be lunch. So that's correctly been overridden now that we fixed our little bug there in the if statement. So that means that now we're ready to go create these records. So let's do that. Let new record equals form dot add new record. Oops. And what we're going to do is new record dot set field values. So there's two options here. There's set field value, which takes a single form ID and then the value you want to set. But the other option is set field values. And what set field values does is it takes an object of key value pairs. So we already created one of those with our record data, so we can just put that in. We do need to do one more thing, which is document.save all changes, so that we can tell Tapforms, hey, we want to save it. We're going to put this after the loop, which means that potentially if there was actually 0 days, then that would be a problem. We probably also want to do, actually, if days num is less than 1, as an extra bit of validation, now that we're thinking about it, if days num is less than 1, because less than 1 is a valid number, alert with message, error, enter days needs to be positive. And we'll put in days and we'll return, and we'll just quickly test that. Days to copy -3, lunch, continue, cannot find days number, days num, save, run, -3 days, and we don't care about that. Enter days needs to be positive, and then we put in -3. Sweet. The reason for that is obviously that will skew our loop down here, because this will be never sort of really work properly, and we should at least tell the user, hey, you're doing it wrong. So we want to give them a bit of heads up. So 3 and undefined. So let's hit run again. Actually, let's hit save. Make sure that we didn't accidentally run that. We haven't yet. So beef soup on the 11th. We've got everything we expect there. Let's hit run on this. Actually, let's open the console first so that we get any errors or log messages. And we'll hit run. We'll do 5 days and we'll set it to lunch. So beef soup, lunch, beef soup, lunch for the 12th, 17th, 21st, 26th. Interesting. So 12th, 14th, 17th. We have a bug. Do we have a bug? I times 24. Try this again. Cancel. Except we're not going to create the new record. And we're going to relog that meal date because those dates don't look right to me. Meal date, meal type. Let's hit run again. 5 days or 6 days, doesn't really matter. April 15th, April 16th, 17th, 16th, 15th, 14th, 13th, 12. Curiouser and Curiouser. So curiously, the entry here exists for the 12th. One exists for the 14th. One exists for the 17th. Which is not correct. That should not be the 17th. And then one exists for the 19th. Okay, so that's not good sign. So what we'll do is we'll order by date created, and that shows us pretty plainly that we made a mistake somewhere, or something went wrong. So we created that 11:15, 11:15, 11:15, and then 9:36. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So let's delete those. That should be 5. Yes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We'll delete those, and we will go back to sorting by meal date. Let's go have a look at this again. And we'll go to the calendar. We'll go back to the 11th. We'll select our beef soup again. And let's double check. So new record, set field values, record data. Let's uncomment that and uncomment that. Hit save. We'll hit run again. So we want to do 5 days. Yes, we want to do 5 days for lunch. We'll hit continue. And one, 2, 14, 17. This feels like a Tapforms bug. Okay, so what it looks like it's happening each time we save, or each time we add a new record, the date is changing. So the first one is on the 12th, which is the right date, right? It should be on the 12th. Then we do 2 days after that, which is the 14th, which would be correct if the 12th was the base date. Then we do 3 days after, which is the 17th. Then we do 4 days after, which is the 21st. And then 5 days, which is 21 plus 5 is 26. So it looks like the definition of our record is changing each time we add a new record, which I don't think is how that's supposed to work. But that's fine. What we'll do is let original time equal that. Original time. And then that maintains our loop. Let's hit save on that. Oh, actually, let's hit save on that. And we're going to clean up our records again. So we're going to go back. We're going to use our date created field because these are going to be, again, the last 6 records that we created. So back to 11:18. Delete those records. Use the calendar view. It's just so much easier to get to this record. And then I'm going to save that just for good measure, and then we'll rerun it again. So we're going to copy 5 days, we're going to make it lunch. Okay, now that does what I kind of expect it to do. The interface hasn't updated yet, but that's neither here nor there. I think I can do that. No. Why is my calendar view not updating? There we go. Okay, so now I have the beef soup for dinner. We have beef soup here for the 12th. For some reason, Taco Tuesday is ahead of the beef soup, so I think this one is a quirk where the time field is actually set on our date record, so we might need to fix that. But we can see beef soup is now set properly for all 5 days of that week. Let's go down to the 29th, which had a similar situation. We'll just hit copy meal, 5 days to copy. Oops. If I can type correctly, 5 days for lunch. And then I can also do for last week, which was actually chicken taco. No, chicken tortilla, actually, I think. Soup tortilla. And we'll hit run on that and copy that for 5 days. And we'll make that lunch. So our calendar view is not updating, but we'll jump over to our list view and we can see lots of beef soup because we're still ordered by the date created, which is good. And when we jump back, we have tortilla soup. Did that not? Wait, did that not? Sunday, May 9th. Scripts run 5 lunch create. There we go. We have our 5 chicken tortilla soups for the interesting 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Interesting how it did the order there for the creation. And now we see chicken tortilla for each of the days of this week. So that's I think we just ran into a Tapforms bug there with the scripting engine. But we've worked around that. And basically what we're doing, we've used the prompter, we've figured out a way of being able to quickly create a bunch of records through the system and get that out there. Now, one other thing I want to do is have a way of bulk entering multiple days worth of planning food. But this video has gone on long enough, so I'm going to end it here. If you're interested in seeing what that video turns out to be, episode 6 I think it will be, of our meal planner, hit the subscribe button. If this was valuable for you, hit the like button. If this wasn't what you were looking for, that's okay. Hit dislike, and maybe YouTube won't send you my way next time, but that's fine. If you have any questions, comments, suggestions for improvement, or anything else, leave a comment below. Hopefully I'm able to edit out the train. It's a bit noisy where I live, but thanks for persevering with me, and happy Tapformsing.